In this episode of the Exploring Information Security podcast, how to get a pen test.
Computers now have primary control of critical functions.
Houston, recommend vector transfer.
Your go for APU shutdown on time.
Roger, go for deploy.
Nice to be in orbit.
Welcome to the Exploring Information Security podcast, where you will learn, explore, and grow your security mindset. I'm your host, Timothy D. Block, and in this episode, we'll be exploring how to get a pen test. With me to do that is Dave Chronister, founder of Parameter Security and founder of ShowMeCon as well. Show notes can be found at exploresec.com/EIS. You can support the podcast, donate, sign up for the newsletter. I'm always open to feedback for the show, so you can hit me up at timothy.dblock@exploresec.com. You can also hit me up on LinkedIn. Let me know that you're a listener, and I will happily connect with you. And then also rate the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. That will get the algorithms churning and get me some more in the podcast, some more visibility among the peoples in the cybersecurity community. So this was a fun one with Dave. It did run long, it eventually did cut it off, but we had just some really great conversation, and Dave's really easy to talk to, and there's a lot of really good insight from him running a pen test company and actually some of the nuances of working with pen test companies. I would tell you my experience working with pen test companies, at a company and trying to find them. It's very hard to find good ones. The struggle is real. And then, really knowing what the difference is between what a good pen test looks like and what one that isn't really good looks like. So we kind of cover the gamut here. Definitely, as I mentioned at the end, let me know if you have any more questions regarding this. I think we could have probably talked for like another hour on this topic and some of the other stuff. So definitely hit me up on that. And with that, let's get into it. Well, so pen test.
Yeah.
And we're kind of talking about how to get a pen test here. So I want to start, this is a new thing I'm starting, is what's the most interesting story you can tell me about doing a pen test for a company, whether you had to go through the process of getting one or just anything within a pen test and something you did for a company. If you can't talk about it, that's fine too.
So can I say a couple of the interesting findings? Because, I think a lot of people in this industry, when you think about pen test and you go, what's interesting, we always start to think about, it's social engineering. But I've had some really interesting findings of pen tests. So two that come to mind. One, this is just kind of a holy crap, people just put anything on their network. We did an internal pen test. They had a professional IT MSP doing their network support, and we go in and we start running the pen test. Didn't think too much about the scope, start running it and realizing half the packets are dropping, and some of them are just 5,000 milliseconds. It's taking forever. And what we realized is their internal IPs were external IPs that they didn't own, that were in South Africa. And somehow their router was still letting half of them work and half of them go out. And it's just that whole thing that the assessor didn't catch it for whatever reason. And we're like, you guys have problems with your network not working very well? Yeah. Well, maybe you need to try a different MSP here.
What? But I'm just what? External internal IPs, someone.
And
what?
It wasn't even their own. So there's
right.
There's a university in St. Louis that owns a B class, right? And they try to use it. So they have printers on the internet. It's not even that. It was another company in South Africa. This company was based in St. Louis. They just were like, well, let's just fucking come up with some.
Holy crap.
So I would say one of the most interesting was the first 0 day I found. And again, I'm not a developer, right? And my background system administration. So a lot of people writing exploit, doing exploit coding, things like that. That's just not me. So for me to find 0 day is a big deal. It was probably, I think it was about 14, 15 years ago. It was a cloud provider. And it was a company that was, again, a hosting company, and they were using this cloud provider. And they wanted us to test it. So we get in there, and it's web-based, and we noticed we started using Burp Suite. We started using a web proxy, right? And we started noticing anytime we would send a packet, it had customer number in it. And so our customer number, I remember, was like 14. So we changed it to 1. View servers, 1. And it showed show customer number 1, all their servers, which, by the way, was our client. So we go add new user, customer 1. We just created an admin, right? Created all this with just a website or with a web browser. Sorry. What I thought was so interesting with this is we were the assholes at the end. So
you always are.
so the company, who, interestingly enough, one of the guys that was on their security team used to be a pen tester. We knew when we first started our company. They were saying, well, Parameter's wrong. We're built on Linux. We're secure by default, right? And you're like, what? That makes no sense. And then the client is saying, you are making it where I can't sleep well at night. And I said, you probably should have done better vendor due diligence. And he goes, don't say that again. I used to be a little more hot-headed, and I said vendor due diligence, and we almost got in a fight. But they didn't pay their bill, so I had to take them to small claims court. It invalidated their NDA. They're out of business, but if you ever go to CaseNet in St. Louis, or Missouri, you can find out about it. But I think, with pen testing, we find so many different things, but those I just found interesting. Of number one, that opened my eyes. I was about 4 years into this. Of crap, sometimes it's just so easy to do so much damage on that cloud instance, but just the availability and the integrity issue of security is like, this company was barely functioning. It was because someone gave them external IPs. An attacker would have probably come in and cleaned up to non-routable IPs just to make sure their attacks work better. So
yeah, I mean that's interesting too, because I wondered too is because I've run into this before, is after coming in with my team. And I've run my own pen test team. So I've kind of been on both sides of it. I've been on the side of receiving the pen test, working with pen test companies, but then also we would essentially vet third parties and pen test them. And we had one where they were like, oh, wow, like, I saw the reports they had before because they were in acquisition, and it was like, these aren't pen tests,
right? Oh yeah,
and even they had the person. So and that's kind of the starting point, right here, right? Is talking about how to get a pen test, is like understanding the difference between like a good one, and that's maybe why they were arguing with you, is because the ones they had before were absolute crap.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
and so like, how do you identify like that you're actually getting a good pen test?
To be clear, they were arguing with us because we found issues. This company guaranteed 100% uptime. They had 2 servers for redundancy. They were both in the exact same rack at a data center, using the same switch in an area that's known for tornadoes. And my contact for the policies was their sales guy. So no, it was they were told they had to do this by a customer, and then they found out, oh crap.
Yeah.
So
I've run into that too, where like people are new to the whole pen test thing and don't realize like what we need. We've said, like, one of the things we made sure was like, we need a test environment, and like had to make it explicitly clear, this cannot be in production. Like your test in production environments.
Right.
If not, you're gonna have problems.
So when we go on sales calls, and I'll get back to like the bad pen test here in a second, but when we go on sales calls, unless it's through a partner. If someone goes, well, I'm just needing to check the box, we're not your company. Because I've had too many experiences of people going, well, we just need to get a checkbox, and now I have all this stuff I have to fix. It's like, okay. So getting into, you mentioned about organizations that don't really do an actual pen test. That's kind of one of the things I found out when I got into this. So, my background, Tim, but I was in IT before this, and I ended up at a bank, 6 charters, having to do pen tests, and I was required to use a banking organization. And 1 year I was allowed to do something different, and all I found was a lot of accounting firms at the time were the ones that did it, and it was a Nessus scan, and they called it a pen test, or it was pre-sale scan. It was these little things, and they're trying to fix the issues. Qualis, yeah. Well, it wasn't even Qualis. It was like, the only issues they found were the stuff they fixed. I'm like, I had a full team, right? So when we started it, we started going through doing this, and dude, it is 2024, and I still run into that. Organizations where you look at the report. I had a client send us something just a couple of weeks ago, and they go, here's our pen test. It's a really good pen test. It's a freaking Qualis report. And it's like, and the joke in our company is man, we work way too hard on this. So, but what is a pen test or a penetration assessment? Because Tim, a test you can flunk, and an assessment just lets you know where you're at.
Ooh, that's a good way to put about it. I've never heard that.
Yeah. So we always fight that. We call them assessments because we've had people come in. It really is like, yeah, you really can't, but we still use the term pen test. It's interchangeable. So essentially the way I like to always talk about, like, what's the difference between a vulnerability assessment and a penetration assessment or pen test is a vulnerability assessment is where I look at your environment. I look at the conditions in your environment based on certain things, packet responses, service labels, things like that. And I can go, well, maybe this is a vulnerability or something. So think about like you have a mole on your arm, right? And you go to the doctor, and the doctor goes, well, based on your health, based on what I see, and based on your family history, this could be cancerous. Now, could he be wrong? Yeah, but it really comes down to the expertise of the assessor. Where a doctor may go, well, let's just go ahead and do a biopsy and make sure. That's where the pen test comes in. So where we may have found a vulnerability in the vulnerability assessment, in the pen testing phase, we try to actually exploit it. And what that allows us to do is in some cases validate, is that vulnerability there? But more importantly, if this vulnerability is exploited, what sort of other issues open up into it? So there is supposed to be a good pen test should have exploitation. It will have automated and manual exploitation, a lot more manual. We should be looking at, now you have different types and you can limit the scopes, but there's pen tests that should be looking at web applications, should be looking at servers, at desktops, and even at network protocols, which is a big one. A lot of pen test or vulnerability assessments or these automated scans don't do. So that's essentially what a pen test is. Now there's different methodologies. The one we go against is the PTES, which is the Penetration Testing Execution Standard, which was created, I think, like 14, 15 years ago. It was a bunch of different pen testers came up with it. And what we found is that meets most regulatory requirements for pen test. And then finally you give a reporting. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and asking for like methodology is probably going to be something that, like, if a company's looking to get a pen test, is see if people have some form of what methodology do they follow.
Yeah, and that's actually really big, because the idea is you have a limited time, and I need to make sure, it's a doctor's physical, right? You need to make sure that everything is being addressed. And so what are they addressing? What aren't they addressing? And one of the reasons I had to, I like having a methodology is pen testers have their bag of tricks. Everybody has their different bag of tricks. I had a dude that was a great pen tester, but he loved password cracking. And unless you had a checklist of the methodology, he would spend 90% of the time going for hashes, cracking hashes. I'm like, Sean, you can't do that, man. But it does give you an idea. Now, for web application, you have the OWASP, the Open Web Application Security Project. There's other ones out there. Those are the two big ones I think a lot of people use. But yeah, it helps you compare apples to apples. And if someone goes, well, we have our own methodology, let me see it, right? And if they don't show it to you, run away, because you're not really sure what you're going to get for your money's worth. I can tell you're not going to get what you paid for.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I do want to clarify one thing, because I called out Qualys, and Qualys is what I consider like a DAS, right? A dynamic application security testing product, right? It's going to scan your site. But then also what I really enjoyed that I used a lot was Qualys is when they checked the website for all the TLS and the connection settings to make sure that you actually have like TLS 1.2 on and like other stuff. So, but that was not a pen test. That's again, to me, a vulnerability assessment is more like it's known stuff there. But when you're talking about like custom web apps that need to be tested, that your internal company has built internally with the development team, there could be all sorts of vulnerabilities in the actual code that's not considered, that scanners can't necessarily find, right?
Well, and full disclosure, we resell Qualys and Tenable in our managed products, right? They're great. They're not pen testing tools, and they will tell you they're not pen testing tools, right? Vulnerability assessment tools. It's kind of like in another area of security, when we go talk to organizations and we go, hey, what's your backup or what's your patching policy? Well, we use Windows Update Services. That's a tool. That's not a policy. It's part of it, right? They do a great job, but if you're just getting that's not enough, right? That's, hey, I need a vulnerability scan. Now, to take it even further back, running that is a scan. For an assessor then to take, let's say, a Qualys, most pen testers are going to use a Tenable just because it has a little more functionality. And then they actually do manual validation and they give you some additional findings. That's a vulnerability assessment. But that's a great, they're great tools. And I will say that's bringing that up. That's one of the things a lot of people run into is well, what tools are you using? Like, do you think when the Vatican hired Michelangelo to they were like, they were like, what brushes are you using? It's like, I get where you're trying to find, but it's really the skills of the assessor that you need to look for. Most everybody's using Metasploit Community because it's just a Swiss Army knife, using a lot of Kali tools. We're using the tools that are needed to get the job done. And it's a good question. It's a good question to ask. If they just come back and go, well, we use Qualys or we use Tenable, you go, okay, maybe this isn't a pen test. Yeah.
Yes, and actually, you and I were on the same wave, because that's what I actually had written down, was like, what are the pen test tools? With the idea of it being a dumb question. Well, maybe I shouldn't call it a question, but a question that should be kind of sussed out. Because you're right, like the tool is the person in this case. Because when I'm building an application security program, I have tools in place, but the final check is a manual. It's essentially like you're talking about manual assessment. So
are you calling pen testers tools?
Yes, I am calling pen testers tools. A lot of them would probably agree with me.
They would all agree. Yeah, in some ways. Yeah. No, it really is. And like any tool, there's not one pen tester that's great at everything. They all have different skill sets. And a good team is one that you'll find. They have different assessors for different tests. Like any of us can run a vulnerability assessment, probably network vulnerability assessment. I say that. I have a guy on my team that was a developer. He's confused by DNS, right? He's definitely not going to run. I was a system admin. I have no issue with that. But I theoretically, I know how every web application vulnerability works. You show me code, I have no idea. I'd be like, oh, there's a tick mark. Okay, that's SQL injection. That's all I know. So everyone has a different skill set, and it's good to if you're getting a pen test, of having the team's background information is always helpful to figure out what are we going to deal with, what are they going to focus on in that assessment.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a good call out. I had my own. I know I had a guy working for me that loved deserialization. I couldn't understand it, right?
Yeah.
He would find it everywhere. I'm more of I'm going to look and stuff and go, what can I do? And it's usually like more like logic flaws or like stuff in the URL, like, because I can, again, like you said, we use tools, but I've talked to a lot of pen testers that are like, I don't use tools because they're looking for the very targeted approach. Like they want to understand the context of the application and like, what can you actually do with it? Because I've had these arguments with other pen test companies of, well, I can automatically spam your chatbot. It's like, well, I'm going to shut down your account. I don't care. That's not a vulnerability. That's not an actual finding in itself. Yeah, I can do that. But what's the actual impact there?
Now, the living off the land assessments, you bring that up. We just got done doing one of those where our only tool we gave them is a VPN connection. And then it's, what can I do using the operating system to actually get through? And PowerShell's a big one, right?
Oh my gosh, yes.
And we are able to use stuff. PS tools, things like that. Non-traditional pen testing tools. Those are always good. They're good for a secondary type of assessment. I wouldn't do that for the straight pen test.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely think tools, because again, we're just talking about it's the person, but the tools are going to help them accomplish certain things. And I read about it constantly about new like open source tooling that, I know pen testers are probably trying and can accomplish whatever they want. But there is something to be said too. I've seen a pen test where they're like, oh yeah, we wrote our own program and inside your environment to debug this thing. And like, they're like, what?
Yeah. We have assessors that do that. We have done that. In this one, it was the exact same thing. It was like, okay, here's a PowerShell script and it pulled stuff. There's a buddy of mine, Metzger. This guy's a blue teamer, but there's been times I'm like, hey, I need a PowerShell script. And he's like, here, just pull this. They don't even think about this. They don't even think about this, and it's like, dude, do you ever want to come over the pen testing side? He's like, no, I got a cushy government job. I'm good to go, man. But
PowerShell's powerful, man. Because I was doing the same thing. The only reason why I got caught was I was trying to download PowerShell Empire onto the box, and they're like, that's how they caught me, was the URL. It wasn't actually me just going there and running PowerShell commands on the environment.
Talking about funny ways, and I kind of go into different things. So I used to teach classes. You knew this for years, and I did a lot of classes. And one of the interesting ones I ever heard of an attacker getting caught was it was a malicious attacker. It was a government agency. They got caught because configuration management caught them. This agency's systems were so out of date, the attacker couldn't get shit running, so he actually updated a system. He started updating it, and it got caught by configuration management. I'm like, man.
Wow, that's good too. That's great on them, right?
Yeah, but come on, like, we failed and won. We successfully failed, or whatever it is,
Successfully failed, yeah. Well, I mean, but that's part of it too, right? I do like I love that quote, by the way. The assessments, where are you at, right? And that's where I've seen it too, where the pen testers have been caught. And because account was created, and you should have alerts set up when like a new admin account, right? They can get into your environment, but you should have little hurdles or at least alerting on this stuff and someone actually looking at them,
right? And
that kind of shows, and that's what I did. Is like, okay, we caught them, right? That's one tick for us. Now respond, right? That's right. So for me, I'm trying to run I don't like this new purple team, but that's essentially what it is, right? It's like the red team and blue team. How have you seen kind of purple team working? Like, what is that?
Well, one thing I was just going to bring back real quick. You brought this up is what a pen test is not. A pen test is not, oh, hey, I got domain creds, I got admins. Pen test should not be, hey, here's the bad stuff that I found, right? Like a Jason Street. We know he does social engineering, but one of the things has been preaching for years is let people find you, let people have a win. And a pen test is a comprehensive annual physical, right? I don't want to go in my doctor and only hear the bad things that are happening. I just had my physical 2 days ago, and he's like, dude, you're doing great. You need to lose some weight, but you're doing great on everything else. Right. And that's where that checklist goes, because we can go perfect. You're doing perfect. You're doing perfect. Because the other issue there is that a lot of non-technical executives will see it. And if they see 20 issues on that report, but we checked 1,000 things, right? And there's only 20 issues, the context is off. Where do I see purple teaming? Where I see red teaming going? I'll tell you what, full disclosure, our company does more white box penetration testing. We don't necessarily get in the purple team. We do some red teaming. I'm not a big fan of red teaming. We can get into why, but I think that there is a need for it. I think, being able to see the whole aspect to it, getting your blue team in there to be able to see, can they actually do detection? Are logs actually working? Are our alerts working? What are we seeing on our end while the pen test is going is really important. And, for years, we always gave people the option to download logs. Here's our logs. So you can kind of see on your side correlation, what's going on. Never did we ever have anybody download them. And now we say they're on, we keep them for 6 months. But I think it's taking it to a next level in some ways, but I don't consider purple teaming and red teaming really penetration testing, because I think you're now taking a pen test and you're actually trying to apply it to something else, where to me, a straight pen test is, here's a comprehensive look. That's also why I'm not a big fan of black box these days, right? Is I look at penetration tester, what we do is, here's a comprehensive list of all the issues going on, where now, purple teaming, red teaming is now looking at how are our defenses actually working? How are our policies, our processes working? Things like that. It's more of the pen test becomes more of a tool in that larger engagement than it actually is part of the engagement itself. Does that make sense?
No, I'm a little confused, but I think we need to define some of this stuff as, like, what is a red team?
Yeah.
To you.
Red teaming engagement is, for us, is where define the pen test again, where we say, here's your environment, right? And in the environment, find vulnerabilities, find issues, things like that. A red teaming engagement instead will be, here's some of our targets, or here's our treasure, or here's our flags in the environment. I need to see, can you get from where you're at, point A, to one of these flags? Now, a true red teaming is you can do whatever you want. Social engineering, penetration testing, phishing, things like that. It's not about, and this is where I was saying that the pen test starts to become part of it. I may do a limited pen test to find vulnerabilities and actually do the exploitation, but where a penetration test, I'm going to be looking at all the servers, and I may just get into that issue, into that flag. Red teaming engagement, I could just call up someone, a la Kevin Mitnick, and fish someone, vish them, and get access to it, and I still won. So instead of finding vulnerabilities, a comprehensive list of vulnerabilities, I guess I should say, were certain things able to be accessed. So it's a lot more targeted.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Okay, so that makes a lot more sense. Red team's more targeted. Pen test is more like broad. You're going to take a broader view of things. Okay, where can I actually go within?
Yeah, and again, it's the different. I'm trying to figure out a medical way of doing it, but the reason I'm not a big fan of it is I could come into your organization, Tim, and you go, here's my data here. Can you get to it? And by the way, that's the only place you can grab it.
Mm-hmm.
And you do a red team engagement. Red team engagements are expensive because we have so many different ways, so many hours, right? And then we can't. And you go, we're awesome. We beat that red teaming engagement. But what you have a client-side exploit on your systems that would allow someone to actually exfiltrate that data off your desktops where they never have to touch that server. You'll never see because you didn't do a pen test. Right. And that's where I have the issue with the red teaming, because it's a lot of work for a little bit of reward and not seeing the full picture. This is also where I'm not a big fan of black box, which I think we're going to talk about later, is where if the goal is to be able to, it's like this, a black box, would be me going into the doctor and the doctor's like, so what issues are you having? I'm like, you need to figure that out, and the doctor's like, well, I mean, I can, but we only have 30 minutes in this office, dude. Like, where are you going? Well, no, you have to figure this out. So that's where I've gotten into it. Purple teaming, and again, I'm gonna be honest, we don't do purple teaming. So if I'm way off on how you think it should be, my idea of purple teaming is you include the blue team, you include defenses in here. So they're actually looking at stuff like, how does MDR, how does EDR respond? What is the threat modeling, or what's the threat of this vulnerability that we actually found? How does it affect the business more than just the straight, we exploited it, we didn't exploit it, here's the finding, here's how to fix it.
Yeah, no, that I think that explains it, I think, really well. That's pretty clear to me, at least. The boxing, I definitely want to talk about. White boxing, black boxing, gray boxing. What are those?
Yeah. And again, I'll tell you, we talked about what's the definition of a pen test: white box, black box, and gray box. I always have to say, clients, what's your definition? So my definition, a true, and they do serve purposes, right? I say I like one better than the other, but it really comes down what your purpose is. And I'm saying that most people's purpose of running a pen test is to find out their vulnerabilities. Okay. So black box assessment is where you will say, Dave, I need you to test our organization. I need you to find vulnerabilities, but my company is, Parameter, right? And that's it. Now I have to find your footprint. I have to find out about your environment. Some people may make this where I also have to be stealthy, right? So I don't alert anything. Again, that's the most, the idea being, that's how malicious attackers handle it. But in reality, that's not really the case, because as a pen tester, I maybe have 4 weeks. An attacker has eternity to find your stuff, right? The other issue is that you can come in and I can find, let's say you have 2 C subnets places. I find one of them and I don't find the other. I spend all my time. I have let's say 200 hours into this. I spend 100 hours just finding it. It's going to be limited testing, and I missed a whole part of your network. Now, on the stealthiness part, that's helpful of, again, CISO Tim comes in and he goes, hey, Parameter, we've been doing white box test. We're doing great. I don't want to test my environment. I want to test my people. I want to test my response. I want to test my defenses. That's where stealthiness, the stealthy black box, comes in. Of what point do the alarm bells start to go off, and and then how do your people actually respond? So I would not use a black box as your annual assessment. I would use that to test your people and have that as a very limited engagement. Gray box may be a little different, a limited knowledge. So a lot of internal pen tests start this way. Here's our scope, and that's it. right? Here's our subnets. Here's the and test during this point. Limited engagement, limited knowledge. So you know a little bit, but not enough. And to be honest, most organizations will not do a straight black box because it is illegal to pen test a company you haven't been engaged with. And oh my God, that's real easy to get the wrong IPs. White box, on the other hand, I almost refer to it as QA testing, right? Here's our subnetting, here's where our desktops are, here's where our servers are, here's the technology we're using. And even on our side, hey, we're about ready to run this test. Okay, run it now. You know, it's very open. It's a lot more comprehensive, but it is not designed to be anywhere like a real malicious attacker. But at the end of the day, it's the most efficient because I see everything. I'm not trying to footprint. And I'm able to test everything. I don't have to be stealthy. Stealthy means equals slow in almost every case, right? So, because that's how any IDS, IPS work is rate of traffic. So it allows me to give you a very comprehensive test in a short amount of time, seeing everything possible.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Thanks for the definition.
Man, I just went back into CHC ISSP training right there. It's like
training. No, I think that because I do feel like within our community, there's kind of a bunch of different definitions, and people might vary a little bit, but I think that does, like, from a very good description and kind of how I've always thought of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So but people use like pen tests and red teaming interchangeably. And I'm like, like a pen test technically falls under a red team,
right?
But like there's also still social engineering. You can drop USB sticks, like you're talking about. And then the purple teaming too. Again, like I feel like everybody, I don't like the mix of it because I feel like your blue team should be whatever the engagement is, you're going to do a reevaluation of your blue team and how they responded, did they respond type of thing, right? And you should have like an after action with the pen test company of like, here's the findings, and kind of try to align that stuff.
Again, here's the logs.
Yeah.
And then your security analyst, your security administrator, engineer, whoever should take them and go, what happened on our side at that time when this ran, right? And you're right, we run into this a lot. It's cool to do black box, right? Just cool to do red teaming, right? But again, it's like saying Qualys is a pen test. Red teaming is not a white box comprehensive pen test. A red teaming engagement, if you have regulatory requirements for a pen test and you do a red teaming engagement, it's not going to pass. If you have to do a regulatory pen test and you do nothing but a black box, it's not going to pass because what they want is a comprehensive technical review of your environment. Are there reasons to do them? Definitely. And and there's people that specialize in those, but trying to do them as part of the pen test or as your pen test is just a recipe for disaster and a waste of money in my mind.
Yeah. What are some other questions that you get asked that kind of pop up in your mind or feel like you have to address prior to starting an engagement?
So one we get a lot. Well, we're just starting this. We've never had a pen test done before, so we want to start with external to make sure we're safe. It's like, okay, I can tell you you're going to be mostly safe. Like I think in the past 10 years, we've maybe had one exploit that we've been able to run, right? Because it's like most things are hosted by other people. You don't have many servers. A lot of stuff's being protected. And by the way, that's not how the attackers come in, right? If you're just starting, you just want to get a better understanding and the safety and the best value for your money is do an internal pen test. And again, the way attackers work is they use what's called client-side exploits. So it is, you have Adobe Reader. My wife works for Adobe, so I always crap on Adobe's vulnerabilities, right? So you have Adobe Reader, right? Every computer seems to have it, and it has a buffer overflow. How does that get exploited? Well, that gets exploited by someone going to a phishing website, getting some sort of phishing. The exploit code gets downloaded on that system through this attack. And then when the exploit happens, that desktop calls out to the network. And that's how breaches and incidents happen, not on the servers. They eventually get to that. But that is where your greatest threat is. That's also where you're going to most likely have out a non-patch software. That's where you're going to have not enough logging. So an internal pen test is probably your best bet when you start off. The other is authenticated scanning. That is where you give someone local admin access on that system. And especially non-technical or non-security people will hear, well, that's cheating. You just gained access to it. I go, yeah, I gained access to it, but it's not like it's going to go, oh, well, yeah, you're vulnerable because you gave me the password. What it allows me to do is if I'm inside your network and I look at a desktop, I'm going to just see what services are open, which are none. And I'm going to see your network stack. That's it. But if I have local admin, I can connect. I can see for Windows boxes, is group policy working? What software may not be patched? Is antivirus working? Is there any configuration issues? I'm going to actually see the problems that are there. Now, that takes a very long time where I may have 200 machines doing a vulnerability scan. And this is part Tenable Qualys. We were talking about that. It may take, without authenticated scanning, may take 30 minutes. This could take 5 days. But doing that every once in a while is a very, very important way. You're going to have a lot of findings, but those are some easy fruit to really reduce your risk.
Yeah, the analogy I've heard is like candy. So it's do you want an attacker to bite into an M&M, which is a hard out shell and a gooey center where they can just essentially go where they want, or do you want them biting into like a gobstopper, which is just a miserable experience, right? For the attacker.
The guy, when I got into this, the guy that kind of took me under his wings is named Ralph Echemendia, and he is just a scary Cuban dude, like sweetest guy in the world. But the guy, like, he just likes cracking me up. He just like, Dave, hackers are lazy, man. He's like, you don't need to be the most secure person. You just need to be more secure than someone else who has what they want, right? And that brings up, like, it's like if you're in Africa being chased by a lion, you don't have to be the fastest. You just don't want to be the slowest, right? Mm-hmm. But it comes down to, hey, what are they looking for? Well, maybe they're just looking to pop a ransomware. Okay, they can do that a lot of places. Well, they're pissed at Tim's latest podcast, and they're coming after you and only you. Well, they don't have another choice, so you better be perfect, But it's that deterrence, right? It's the club method.
Yeah, ransomware podcast. I'd be okay with that, because that'd be a big news item. The Exploring Parameter Security podcast, ransomware, which sucks for Squarespace, by the way, because I'm hosted on Squarespace. I don't have any infrastructure. Squarespace kind of gets hosed there. But,
there's just a picture of you, like the worst profile picture. I was attacked.
Actually, we do, but based on a very side thing right here. Me and Tim Fowler created Only Tim's on exploresec.com. I'll see if
I love it.
Find that. Yeah. And that was based off of going to ShowMeCon. We were like, so we've only added people from the industry that are also named by Tim. They have pictures of. I did not make it. Like, you have to go find it. It's up there somewhere.
So anybody that listens to us, go do Fowler stuff. So Fowler, he worked for a couple companies before, so he worked with us for a couple years. And I'm going to tell the best, two of the most amazing things that have happened to me. Going back to stories here, and it was Tim Fowler. And I can tell these, okay? Number one, Heartbleed. Oh, was Heartbleed the one that would randomly spew out? If you did it was.
I have a story for Heartbleed. Yeah.
So I think it was Heartbleed. Yeah, the SSL. Yeah, there's SSL.
Yeah,
he found a Heartbleed vulnerability on a printer, and when he ran it, it would arbitrarily spew out data. It spewed out the domain admin password that they had put in there, and it allowed them to compromise the entire network. Right?
That is amazing.
And Tim, if you've ever met him, from North Carolina, just really kind of soft spoken, he just came in, he goes, you will not believe what just happened. And the other is I have arthritis, so I have to get x-rays done. And we were doing a test for an x-ray company, and I went and I got my x-rays, and by the time I got back to my office, Tim's like, hey, do you want to see your x-rays? He had just by chance gotten into an area and he was looking at the patient data, and mine just popped up. And I go, oh, we're putting that in the report. And we put it in the report, and they go, you can't do it. It's HIPAA violation. I go, no, I'm the patient. I gave you permission. It's important. Fix this. So, yeah.
Oh man, I've got so many stories that could go on top of that. Like healthcare is some of the worst, just because they've been so far behind on a lot of security stuff. And I did recently learn that healthcare only has like a 2% revenue, right? So that explains why there's such a hard budget and a hard line on some of that stuff. And security is just awful. Like I was telling you, what I thought about with test first production was we were like, oh yeah, it's test. We got into the production database that had like a bunch of gnarly medical pictures, and if you've ever gone in and got your picture for something that's like, I don't know what this is, but my team saw that and it scarred them because they're like, I did not come into work to see that today.
We have someone that deals with we deal medical, and we had one that was organ donation, and we got into the wrong.
Oh, you get some
pictures, and it's just and it is, it's, you don't know what you're going to get into. And that brings up a good point, is rules of engagement.
Yes.
What is allowed, what's not allowed. And if at the kickoff call there's no rules of engagement set, run. I know we briefly mentioned AI and continuous pen testing. Well, what pen tester is able to do is look at something and go, this server looks really old. Don't scan it, especially because it looks like it's in an ER situation. We had a company like that. It was a hospital years ago. We get in and we realize, because of some of the vulnerabilities we know are on those systems, had they been scanned, they would have hung. And
Absolutely.
These were in the ER in the what's the most ICU. And it's like, you know what? Computer doesn't know that. A pen tester does. So having those rules of engagement become really important. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Do you have like a resource for someone to look up, like what would be a good rules of engagement? Because I imagine some people could be misguided in that. Like,
yeah, I don't know of any. Our rules of engagement we follow come down to what has bit us in the ass over the past 17 years, right? And some of the big ones that you really have to get into on both sides is, what is not going to be tested, what will be tested. So typically, if we have something we know will cause availability issues, a service to hang, something like that, we're not going to test without you knowing. Again, this is why we like white box, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anything that causes destructive, that brings up another issue we ran into. Anything that causes destruction, we're not going to run. And then we're going to run it during this time frame. Don't be afraid to have a pen test run in your network during business hours. It's the best time to do it. Pen tests do not create a lot of data. All your systems are online. It's a good time to run things. When we started doing forensics, one of our first incident responses was a now defunct pen test company came in to a client, and the pen tester got into the SQL database and decided to drop tables. And they didn't have a backup, so we had to come in and collect logs for our lawsuit that was happening, and it was like, that was fun.
Yeah.
Don't be Bobby drop tables, right?
Yeah. No, I've been being on the other side of it. Being as a company, we had pen testers try to exploit a networking device, and they didn't fully read the exploit where it said, if rebooted, could cause outages or something like that, because or the exploit could cause a reboot, which would take the network, which it did. So I think, and we got in a little bit of trouble with that. We've also had testing. Again, we would test our third parties with a pen test company just based on contract issues, right? And it was definitely they would set boundaries of like, do not run anything on servers, right? Or
right.
And I think that's important. But I also think too is like when to report. Hey, if you see this, we need to stop the pen test, and you need to call somebody, not send an email. Call somebody because you found like something very critical that could be exploited or is actively being exploited.
You should have a single point of contact on both sides.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right. Again, things have become different. I trying to think the last time we've had to call someone at 2 a.m. because we mostly do our pen test during the day, unless
Right.
it's international. But it's important to have a single point of contact, because if you're having an issue, you need to have someone that you know you're going to be able to get a hold of at any time and that they can deal with it. On the other side, the pen testing company should give you a single point of contact. I had a client, this was when we first started. We're running where we hadn't run the pen test yet, and a contact calls. It was a guy I knew from when I was in banking. He goes, "Hey man, when are you going to be done with this pen test? My network's been going down." I'm like, "Dude, we haven't even started." And he goes, "Oh, I thought it was you." And I'm like, "Why didn't you call?"
Yeah.
And he had his ISP was having issues.
That's the other thing I want to call out too, because working inside of a company, you don't want to tell everybody.
Right.
Because what happens, I mean, partly it's again to see who finds what, right? Because I've had networking engineers find stuff and it's like, good job, great, right? But the other thing too is that if there is a pen test going on in exactly that scenario, the Coke machine's not working. Oh, it must be the pen test. They're running a pen test, so it's the pen test. Well, the security team will get blamed for absolutely everything in the environment.
We have a housekeeper, and just, I guess, humble brag that we have housekeeper. Anytime something's lost, we're like, fucking Linda. And she knows we do it. And she's like, yeah, just keep blaming me. She's in the other room right now. She just left. Yeah, it is. But having that single point of contact it's not me now having to figure out who I need to talk to, because one of the biggest reasons we run into this issue is we start to get in and we go, oh crap, they've been compromised. And really quick, this turns into a crime scene. And when that happens, you need to use out-of-band communication. You need to limit, because you don't know if it's an insider. And this is the straight person, but there should be an agreement, because it'll always be like a CISO, or in some case CEO. It's like, you're going to get us the subject matter expert we need to talk to on this. I'm not going to work with the CEO and try to explain to him why a buffer overflows a bad
right
on their website, or their website was compromised or something. So
yeah. So where should people or organizations go to find a pen test company?
I think it comes down to what their needs are. Do you want a checkbox? Chances are, if you want a checkbox, you're not listening to this podcast. So,
I can appreciate that. I'm okay with that.
Yeah. I don't care about security, but I listen to Tom's security podcast. It's so weird. Like, I do not play RPG. I don't play role-playing games at all, but I love RPG literature. It's so freaking weird. So I guess some people may be like that. I think a lot of us boutique organizations are really a good start. We specialize in this stuff. When I started my company 17 years ago, I met with a Fortune 500 CISO or CIO. Sorry, they didn't even have a CISO. And I mentioned what pen testing is. At the time, it was referred to as ethical hacking. He goes, "That's a novel concept. I'll let you know if I know anybody that needs it." Right. And now everybody and their brother does pen testing. And unfortunately, some larger organizations have security engineers, they're blue teamers, so they go, well, we can run these. It's easy. It's just running Nessus and maybe Metasploit Pro or whatever it is these days. You're not going to probably get the best pen test. You could in some of them, but you take organizations, just name dropping, Parameter, Secure Ideas, which is Kevin Johnson, Dave Kennedy over at Trusted Sec, JC over Carruthers at Snowfensive. Like, that's all we do. So you're going to have the employees are pen testers. They're not security engineers trying to do pen test. That's a good place to start. I would typically recommend that you use a pen test company that does not provide other services, or at the very least, does not provide the services that are being tested, which is important. Full disclosure, we do pen test, and we also offer MDR for some clients. But when we're doing a white box pen test, MDR is white labeled because that's not in the scope of it, right? But I think you need to look at organizations like that. Understand it is a man hours. It's hours based. It's not cheap. So you want to make sure that you are doing the right things you want to do at the beginning. Again, don't start off with a red teaming engagement, right? You're probably not ready for it. Have a white box internal pen test, maybe an external pen test. If you've never really done security before, you've just run into Tim's podcast to figure out what to do. Start with an internal vulnerability scan or vulnerability assessment with authenticated connections, because part of the issue is a pen test is a report in time of issues. Once you have that report, you have to fix those issues. And if you bite off too much too soon, you're going to get disheartened. You're going to think you suck, and you're never going to fix anything. We had a 5-year engagement with a Fortune 500 company, and we had the same findings every year. They never fixed the issues. And you get to the point you go, well, why are we even doing this? So don't buy off too much at the beginning. Have a strategy for doing it. Have your cycle be 36 months to do it all.
Well, and I would also say that, like, I want to. It was always tough because we had our one good pen test company that we knew was going to come in and beat us up and give us new stuff every year, because what we were doing is we were actually fixing them, but we tried to go away from them because we want to get a different perspective.
Novel concept there, Tim.
I know. I try to be on good security teams, but we would go in and fix them. But then we tried to, we got to rotate to a different pen test company because we want, like you're talking about, there are different perspectives, things like that. But we would switch to it, and I'm going, guys, you missed findings. There's a view. If you right click on the application, view page source, there's a finding right there. How is this not in this report? Right. And the rest of the report was just hot garbage. That was just my example of, like, my litmus test of, did you actually find this? Can you call this out? Right. Yeah. And so it does get a little frustrating because people are really good at selling pen tests. So, I guess, like, what are some of the red flags that you might be not dealing, or that you are dealing with a good pen test company? I think you've kind of called out some of that there. What would you say?
What methodologies do you work with? Some of the red flags are, well, we're going to find if you've been compromised, if you've been hacked. We're going to be able to, anything dealing with malware or anything like that. Like, a pen test is not going to tell you any of that stuff, right? That's programs. So we'll run into that. I'll have clients that go, well, the pen test, I've actually had partners. I had this just a couple months ago, a partner, a reseller, and they sold blue teaming stuff. They're like, Parameter will be able to tell you if you've been attacked. And it's like, or hacked. It's like, no. It's real hard to say that in front of the client. It's like, we've had cases where we found stuff, but this is not a comprehensive thing there. Priced really, really low.
That's a red flag.
That's a red flag.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Because it is assessors, if I'm selling antivirus software, it's cheaper per license the more I sell. Pen test, a manual pen test, if I have one that takes 40 hours, takes 40 hours, 2 takes 80 hours, 3. So you have to have someone, and they're not cheap, and it's hard to find good people. So if someone comes in and goes, we're going to do a pen test for 256 nodes, and we're going to do it for $2,000, they're either doing automated, they're outsourcing it to very dubious, probably people who don't have the skill set, or it's someone that doesn't know what they're doing. Our pen test, our cheapest pen test right now is $10,000 for an external, less than 5 IPs, right? And it's expensive. Again, that's why going back to do you want to do a red teaming for $50,000, not get what you needed, or do 3 do an internal, external, and web app and not fix everything? It's a lot of money to spend. So that's another one. The other is they don't let you know. Well, 2 others. One is they don't let you know who the pen tester is. Mm-hmm. They don't give you a background of the pen tester. Now, one of the things we run into with big organizations is I want to know the team that's going to be on this. And it's like, okay, theoretically, I understand that, but you have to understand as a company, I have resources. I make money by putting them out. You're not letting me know when you're going to do your assessment. You're not going to let me know if you're going to do your assessment. You've just gotten a quote. I don't know if that person's available, and it's not a good business decision for me to just have that person not billable just in case you sign, So, but to understand what the skill sets are and making sure you have comparable people. The other is, and one of the things I'm real proud about our team on is communication throughout the process. So one of the things I found when I used to get pen test when I was on the blue side was, okay, give us the IPs, and then 2 weeks later I'd get a report. I'd never have any communication. Our people are communicating all the time, and that serves a couple purposes. One, our goal is when you get a report, you should pretty much know what's going to be on the report. That should allow you, A, to be able to maybe fix some stuff, B, to start have management responses. When I was at the bank, my boss was the owner of the bank holding companies. This is an 80-year-old dude that anytime he saw the findings, he's like, Dave, how are we going to fix this? And it's like, I just saw it, right? And so it's like, you have to make stuff up. This allows you to fix it. But more than that, a report can only go so deep. I mean, it's a one-way narrative. I want, I'm doing pen tests for you, Tim, and I find a SQL injection, and you go, so what exactly did you run? What does this mean? And most pen testers are passionate what they do, right? And they'll go, this is how I was able to run it. I kind of saw some issues in this other area. Here's some resources to understand SQL injection a little bit more. Here's some videos you may want to look, like stuff that a two-way conversation will by default be more in depth than a report ever can be, is always a big thing. And B, or in the final one, make sure they give you a sample report of what they're going to give you. So you have an understanding of what your findings are going to be. They have cyber liability insurance.
Ooh,
because crap can go wrong. And if they're not insured to cover you, you're setting up a big red flag, that you're setting up yourself up for issues. Because by the way, I think most of us have never had to, man, I'm glad my table's wood. I'm knocking on this thing. I've never had to submit, but if most pen test companies are good, have gone through this, have their insurance. A company that doesn't have their insurance, I would be dubious on the quality of their assessors to be able to not cause issues, kind of like the network thing you talked about.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely becoming more and more of a thing, is that insurance. So cool. All right, man, what would you like to plug? We're kind of at time here, so
if you do need a pen test, Parameter Security, we've been 17 years in the business. Love to talk to you. I'll also plug some friends companies, Secure Ideas. We work a lot with them as well. They are an amazing group down there. And then ShowMeCon. I have a conference. We are back June 9th and 10th with pre-conference training. It'll be in St. Louis, Missouri. Our official voice on the internet of ShowMeCon is your Tim DeBlock.
Oh,
and it's a really good time. I did the math. 22 countries I've spoken in, and 45 states, and I tried to take the best of the conferences I went to and tried to make it that into Parameter or into ShowMeCon. We have a good time. You're going to learn stuff you can take back with you. You're going to meet with really passionate speakers and meet a really great community of people, but it is very corporate-ish, so you can get your company to pay for it.
Yeah. No, and I've talked about this several times, right? It's a really great environment, different from your DEF cons and even your Black Hats. It's kind of that middle ground between all the conferences combined. It's really because maybe this is best. It's a little bit self-aware, right? But it's still professional, but it's self-aware.
So I've been to cons where I'm like, guys, I don't want you, we're all security professionals. Why are you trying to attack my phone? Back when the web session hijacking, it's like, we're not that, but we get the speakers from those type of cons, right? But we have really good food. We have a really good environment, and again, everybody's passionate. Like, Tim will get up into our presidential suite and these get a group. You've done this years. Just get a group and they're just talking. They're not getting paid for it. They're just sitting there when they could be just sitting back drinking, just not talking about work. This is what they're passionate about, and they will talk to everybody about it, and you get to learn a lot of things there. So,
yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, Dave, thanks for joining me we might need to do another episode. Did I cut out? Let me do that.
Yeah. You just cut out for a second there.
Yeah, I got excited and hit my mute button. Maybe I'll just leave that in. Thanks for joining me to discuss how to get a pen test. I do feel like we could have gone on a lot more. So if people have questions, hit me up, and maybe we'll do another session about getting a pen test. So
we can talk about getting a social engineering assessment, the do's, the don'ts, and lessons learned. Real quick, you can leave this in if you want to, or not leave this in. We talk about reporting. Make sure you protect your report. I think you know this story.
Yeah.
We had an organization that did a social engineering. They did product stuff, and a large company was coming out with a new product that people wanted, and they had to have this product to be able to come up with their product, right? Does that make sense? I'm trying to keep it very generalized. Because the names are very well known. But we had done a physical social engineering, and they decided to take our report and they put it on their public server. Well, on eBay, some of these new products were showing up, and eBay actually called the company because they knew this wasn't even released yet. Like, it was international news that they were going to be released, like that big a deal. And came to find out that one of the warehouse workers found our report on a server, read it, and used it to be able to steal some of this product. So it validated our stuff was correct. Protect your report.
Yeah, your report.
Thanks, Tim, for having me on.
I love that. All right.